It is a great pleasure of mine to be sitting up here with Ritchie. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us. You have been a steadfast supporter of this industry, and I think that's pretty rare. Even people who are now getting on the train weren't there, when you were, and so it's very gratifying to me to be able to sit up here and talk to you about Web3, and appreciate you coming and attending this event today. Let's start with the fact that your perspective on crypto is just different than most people in Congress, and I'm just interested to know, why do you view it so differently?
Well, first, it's an honor to be here. I think probably part of it is I'm different from the gerontocracy that is the United States Congress. But, for me, first, I love the country. And I feel like in order for the United States to remain the leader of the free world, we have to dominate the field of emerging technologies like crypto and blockchain, AI, quantum computing, synthetic biology. And I feel like if we set a tone that is hostile to innovators, then we're planting the seeds of our own decline. And so it's in my nature as a policymaker, as an American, to embrace innovation as our greatest asset. And then for me, I see quite clearly that blockchain and crypto has the potential to revolutionize both technology and finance, right? It has the potential to create a new layer of the internet, Web3. It has the potential to create a more decentralized financial system. An analogy that I think of is historically there were neighborhoods that were controlled by the mafia, right? And if you were a local business looking to work in that neighborhood, you would have to pay a tax to the mafia. There's a sense in which big tech is the mafia of Web 2. And so I see crypto and blockchain as our best hope for liberating entrepreneurs and enabling them to earn, not only create, but own the fruits of their labor.
Well, that's very well said. And it's unusual and I have made many trips down to D.C. and talked to lots of senators and Congress people down there, and it's unusual to hear that insight that we have to support the up-and-coming technologies, even if they may be disruptive to the established tech companies, and that's super important. Because I feel like a lot of government tends to be, they spend more time with the larger companies, they know the larger companies well, they want to support the larger companies, and they're just not as plugged into and understanding the next big things. And then when they finally arrive, like AI has been around for 20, 30 years, right? And then all of a sudden in the last year, everyone's freaking out about AI, right? But of course, it's been around for a long time, just no one was paying attention to it. So I find it very refreshing that you know this stuff.
And like for me, and what I find most baffling is the criticism from progressives.
Right.
Like, it seems obvious to me that the project of decentralizing the internet and decentralizing finance is profoundly progressive. Like there are progressives who complain about the centralization of power in finance and technology, but then those same people are opposing the very technology that would solve that problem.
Do you think that one of the issues with Web3 is that people see it as people making money, that there's a speculative aspect to it, and people are speculating on Bitcoin or speculating on Ethereum, and so that just rubs progressives the wrong way?
Look, I mean, there's the use of blockchain as a computer, and then there's the use of blockchain as a casino.
Right.
And I do feel like people pay more attention to the casino than to the computer. But you have to look at the totality of the technology. There are people in DC who believe that crypto has no use case beyond ransomware,
right,
beyond criminality. And my response is that there's more to crypto than ransomware, just like there's more to money than money laundering.
Right.
Like, no serious person would propose eradicating money in order to eradicate money laundering.
Yeah.
And so no technology should be judged only by its worst uses. You have to look at both the benefits and the cost.
Another area where crypto gets a bad rap, and I'm not saying that we don't deserve it a little bit,
Yeah.
is the environmental footprint of proof of work, Bitcoin. Ethereum used to be on proof of work, no longer on proof of work. How big of an issue do you think that is for the industry with the progressives?
Look, it's an issue, but the environmental impact, as you know, varies depending on the consensus protocol.
Right.
Right. So if your consensus protocol is proof of stake, then the environmental impact is next to none.
Right.
But what I find is that every elected official seems to have an opinion on crypto, but very few of them can actually define crypto or blockchain or Web3 or draw a distinction among the three. And I feel like before rushing to judgment, you should do your homework and you should educate yourself about the workings of the technology.
Yeah, there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Yeah. They're not that well informed.
I call it, crypto derangement syndrome. Right.
Exactly. Okay, so I wrote down a few questions. I want to get back to that. This is this I really wanted to talk about this. You represent the South Bronx, one of the most economically challenging neighborhoods in the United States. What is the relevance of crypto to your constituents? What in this technology do you see there for these people who you work for?
Look, so for me, the most compelling use case of crypto is payments, right? Stablecoin can tokenize the dollar. Blockchain enables real-time transactions, and blockchain and stablecoins can revolutionize a $100 trillion payments industry. For me, the traditional financial system has fundamentally failed the lowest income communities.
They don't want to bank them.
Right? You have banks, check cashiers, that have long delays, high fees that prey upon the poorest people of color. I'll cite one study more than 10 years ago. The New York City Department of Consumer Affairs found that low-income New Yorkers spend more than $200 million a year on check cashing fees. And so for me, the ability to move money in real time at the speed of the blockchain can be a game changer. It can create a better, cheaper, and faster payment system for the lowest income Americans, including better, cheaper, and faster remittances.
By the way, it's not just the individuals, it's also the small businesses. Yeah. They can't get banked either. Yeah. It's crazy. And I guess the banks don't think they can make enough money there or something. I don't know what it is, but it's offensive to me.
Yeah, and you have a duopoly that controls the payment industry.
Yeah.
And I think blockchain is our best hope for breaking up the monopolies and duopolies.
I love it. Okay, so how do you feel about the way the regulators, particularly the SEC, are approaching this sector right now? We all in the industry have our thoughts, but I'm curious to get your take on it.
I agree with the industry's criticism of the SEC. In particular, from the SEC, there's been a lack of regulatory clarity. I'm no fan of Gary Gensler.
Me neither.
He refuses to issue a single rule on crypto. He refuses to provide guidance. And he's been engaging in a practice known as regulation by enforcement. And for me, regulation by enforcement is the equivalent of accusing someone of speeding or ticketing someone for speeding without telling them the speeding limit.
Right.
Like for me, clarity is the cornerstone of compliance. Like you as an entrepreneur need to be clear about what the rules require of you in order to comply with them. And Gary Gensler refuses to tell the industry, here are the rules of the road. And then there's also the problem of mixed messaging. The CFTC claims that Ether is a commodity.
Right.
The SEC claims it's a security.
Right.
The CFTC tells us that Tether is a commodity. The SEC tells us it's a security. The Fed says it's a currency. And then Gary Gensler himself has an ever-evolving position. He first said that Ether was a commodity. Then he said it was a security. Then he said it depends. And so how can you possibly comply with the regulations when you're receiving mixed messages, not only between and among the regulators, but from the same regulators.
Right. And so Congress is trying to fix this. There's a market structure bill. Is that called FIT 21? Is that the same thing?
FIT 21, yeah.
So that's the market structure bill. That's trying to address some of these questions about how do we think about which regulators are regulating which tokens and all that kind of stuff. What the commodities regulators should be regulating, what the securities regulators should be regulating. So that's the market structure bill. Then there's a stablecoin bill, which establishes what stablecoin issuers need to do to protect the holders of stablecoins. And those two bills got out of committee, and you supported them. Is that correct?
I did, yeah. I was one of only 4 Democrats to support both, yeah.
And then there's one more bill that was called Keep Your Coins that did not get out of committee, or did it get out of committee?
That might have gotten out of, but that was not negotiated on a bipartisan basis.
I see.
Yeah.
So the good thing about the market structure bill and the stablecoin bill is that they have bipartisan support. Do you think that they will get to the House floor?
I do, but we need the industry to mobilize and reach out to members of Congress in order to build the broadest possible bipartisan support for the bill.
That's important.
Yeah.
What we need to do is we need to reach out to our elected officials and explain to them why they should support these bills.
And there was a disconnect. So the market structure bill went through agriculture and financial services.
Right.
In financial services, there were only, I think there were 4 of us who supported the bill. In agriculture, it was unanimous, both Democrats and Republicans.
Wow, that's really interesting.
So there's a disconnect between the two.
I see. And so that disconnect will be interesting to see how that disconnect plays.
My sense is that the industry was much more effective at lobbying the Agriculture Committee than the Financial Services Committee.
Got it. So it is time now for our industry to be reaching out to our elected officials, our congresspeople, our senators, and telling them these 2 bills are important. They need our support. We need regulatory clarity, and these bills have bipartisan support in committee, and we should.
And I would tell people, reach out to because for most members of Congress, crypto is an abstraction.
Right, of course.
And there's nothing more powerful than hearing directly from your constituents or small businesses and entrepreneurs from within your district. And so I would tell you to reach out to your members of Congress, humanize the issue, explain the impact of crypto on your life, on their districts, and it makes a difference. Because if you do not define what you stand for, your enemies are going to define it for you.
Right. How important is the fact that I'm a business, I'm an employer, I'm trying to grow my business, and if you can give me regulatory clarity, I can grow my business, going to hire more people in your district. Does that matter to people?
It does. Because I think most members do care about creating jobs in their district and supporting small business.
Great.
But that relationship building needs to happen.
And then if these bills get through the House, there's the further challenge of the Senate may have their own take on these 2 issues, and the Senate might pass a different set of bills. And then what's the process? Let's say the Senate did pass their own bills. Then what's the process to reconcile?
So either the House could pass the Senate version, or the Senate could pass the House version, or the 2 houses will conference and come to a compromise.
Do you have a guess where we might end up on this one?
The crypto legislation faces a more complicated path in the Senate.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So it's unclear whether it's going to pass at all. Yeah.
And let's say in this...
But I would argue the broader the bipartisan support in the House, the more pressure we exert on the Senate.
Okay, so that's super important.
Yeah.
Try to get these bills to pass the House with a broad majority, like a 2/3 majority or something.
You want the bills to be too bipartisan to ignore.
Right. Let's say that this legislative session ends up disappointing. And we don't get something done. Is the fact that there's been progress on legislation a step in the right direction? Does it set us up for another shot, or is it like a bad thing to lose?
Look, legislation, especially in DC, which is known for gridlock, is more of a marathon than a sprint. And so even a failed compromise is a foundation on which you can build in the future.
Got it.
So I would see it as you might lose the battle, but still win the war in the end.
So my take then is that the very best thing that this industry could fight for right now is for the House to pass these two bills with broad bipartisan support. If we can do that, if the industry can rally our Congress people to vote for these bills in a very significant way, that will send a message.
Absolutely.
All right, then that's what we're going to go do.
Absolutely.
All right, back to my list of questions. So you talked about a lot of misunderstandings. People in government don't really understand this industry, so they know people use it for ransomware or it has a bad environmental footprint. What do we do to combat that? Do we have to all take time and go down to DC and walk the halls of Congress and meet with the elected officials and educate them?
Okay, I think in DC you succeed on the strength of relationship building. So I would encourage everyone to build relationships with their members of Congress. But most members of Congress lack knowledge about crypto. And I would just encourage people to tell their stories, refute the most common myths surrounding crypto, whether it's relating to ransomware or environmental degradation, because the reality is far more complicated than the narrative that's out there about crypto.
So one thing I've learned over the years is that the direct relationship with the elected officials, with you, with your colleagues, is super important. But I've also learned that the staffers are really important, that you also need to make sure that the staffers are in the information loop and they're getting educated and informed as well. Would you agree with that?
It's both. You have to educate the staff, you have to educate the member. It's either, some members like me are more hands-on when it comes to policy, and then there are members who defer to their staffs.
So,
but I feel like most members and staffers are only hearing from the anti-crypto activist, and are rarely exposed to the other perspective.
What committees are you on?
Financial services. Yeah.
Just financial services.
And there's a new committee on China.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And so do you have a dedicated staffer on both of those, or do you just have one policy person who helps you on everything?
I have a legislative director who oversees the whole legislative operation, and then I have a legislative assistant for the China committee and a legislative assistant for the financial services committee. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question, and this is a question near and dear to my heart. Do you think that every elected official in D.C. should have a technology literate person on their staff?
Yes, because the most important issues that we're confronting implicate technology.
Yeah.
Whether it's AI, quantum computing, blockchain. But I actually feel like that's where the industry could play a role. I mean, there's nothing that prevents the industry from creating a fellows program.
Well, I think we should.
That creates a pipeline of talent to Congress.
I think we should.
So.
I think we absolutely should. And I think there are elected officials such as yourself who are technology literate, and maybe you grew up with it, I don't know, but you understand technology as well as anybody I've met in D.C., so that's...
It's not so much that I have tech, but I have an open mind, and I know what I don't know. And
you're curious, though.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I see it as my role to create rules that enable the best actors to innovate while holding the worst actors accountable. And I feel like there's a difference between regulation and weaponization, and what we see from the SEC is the weaponization of government against the crypto industry.
Well, I agree with that. Well, we're done. I'd like everyone to give a big hand to Ritchie, because he is the kind of elected official that we need more of in D.C.
Of course. Okay.
Ryan, do you have anything for us?
Okay.
Do you have to go?
No, we don't have to go.
I'm happy
Want to ask us a question?
Okay, no, well, you had mentioned Q&A, so I came
yeah,
out here ready to go. Does anyone have questions? While we look for hands, I'll ask one. Ritchie, you've been, I think, putting your neck on the line and taking a leadership position, even when it is not necessarily politically popular in your party. The one that you did not cross the line on that came out of committee, the Keep Your Coins Act, almost feels like an affirmation of constitutional rights that already exist, right? To self-custody, to not necessarily have surveilled, personal wallets. Why was that one out of the three bills so contentious, where you saw strict party lines between that versus the other bills?
So we might disagree on this one, but with the market structure bill, and so the Republicans are in charge of the House, right? Patrick McHenry is the chair of Financial Services, and I have to give Chair McHenry enormous credit. He gave Democrats like me opportunity to shape the market structure bill and the stablecoin bill, and to address whatever concerns we had. And in the end, I committed to supporting it because there was a bipartisan process. We did not have the benefit of shaping the Know Your Coins bill. So, we cannot support bills without thoroughly reviewing them and vetting them, because there could be a provision there that's problematic. So
Yeah, well, so this is interesting.
that was not opened
So that
up.
was a process, not a political
Process. Yeah.
Ryan, this is really interesting because I met with Hakeem Jeffries around this time, and I asked him what needed to happen in the House for these bills to be successful. And he said, the Republicans need to invite us into the room and have a conversation about these bills. And if they do that, there are some in my caucus who will support them. If they don't do that, they can't support them. It's just, it's like if you don't get invited to your friend's barbecue, then, you're not his friend, obviously. It's kind of like that, right?
The reality is, when you vote for a bill, you're taking responsibility for the consequences of the legislation. Yep. And so before you take that responsibility, you want to thoroughly vet the bill. You want to ensure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. And we were never afforded the opportunity to shape the Know Your Coins bill, to be blunt.
That was a miss.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
We have time for two questions. So we'll do one here and then.
Yeah, hi. I just want to say I'm just so moved by everything you've said, and it's so good to see leadership at at a level of understanding what's going on. And while we are there rallying as a community, I would say let's not forget those at the bottom of the totem pole, the billions who are unbanked, the underserved, et cetera. They're watching us. How do we educate them and make sure they are not disillusioned by all of this, discouraged by this, don't feel that they're included in this? How do we get them to also get behind their leaders? Thank you.
What I find fascinating about crypto is that it's something of a Rorschach test, right? You can project your own ideological biases onto crypto. So for libertarians, crypto is a tool for radical independence from the government, from the establishment. But for progressives like me, it's a tool for lifting up the most vulnerable people in our society. Like something like stablecoin can give, the most impoverished countries in the world access to a stable currency, or could enable immigrants to transfer their money without paying exorbitant fees. And so I feel like the crypto industry, and I'm going to give an honest criticism, has a powerful progressive story to tell, but there's been a fundamental failure to tell it.
We're not telling it.
But you can harness the power of this technology to revolutionize technology and finance for the good of the lowest income people, not only in our country, but throughout the world.
So my question actually dovetails on that. So one of the things that I think is surprising is if you look at entrepreneur rates in the United States, African American women are actually the highest entrepreneur rate as far as willing to start their own business. But you see lack of capital being a major issue in being able to form these small businesses. So what would you like to see from really the crypto community as it relates to capital formation and enabling lower income areas to be able to get access to these kind of micro capital, if you will, and how might we be able to sell that, because right now most of that's illegal to the SEC, realistically.
You know what I find fascinating about crypto is that it's something of a Rorschach test, right? You can project your own ideological biases onto crypto. So for progressives like me, it's a tool for radical independence from the government, from the establishment. But for progressives like me, it's a tool for lifting up the most vulnerable people in our society. Like something like stablecoin can give, the most impoverished countries in the world access to a stable currency, or could enable immigrants to transfer their money without paying exorbitant fees. And so I feel like the crypto industry, and I'm going to give an honest criticism, has a powerful progressive story to tell, but there's been a fundamental failure to tell it. A little bit. I don't know if I'll have a particular, because I think it might not be a question to which I have a good answer, but I feel like we need to have a regulatory framework that legitimizes crypto so that we can create more possibilities for capital formation. You know, in the world of traditional finance and Web 2, so much of access to capital is about who you know rather than what you know. You know, if you could have someone who grew up in poverty and someone who comes from privilege and they have the same idea, but only one of those people is likely to have the social capital and the economic capital to translate that idea into an actual business. And what's exciting about the world of blockchain for me is that it's a decentralized platform on which all of us are equal. Like, I feel like a world that's governed by code is going to treat us more equitably than a world that's governed by a centralized corporation.
Why don't we end on that?
Absolutely.
That's
Fred Wilson,
amazing.
Rep Torres, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for coming to MainNet 2023. We'll see you here next year.